You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Imus.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1115, titled Pieces of a Continent. And Travis, so many people tell us that when we go to our continental breakfasts that you and I are, one of a piece. Is that the phrase?
Two peas in a
Two
pod?
pieces in
something
a pod?
like that? Yeah.
I like how the One Piece manga has peace in the title. That doesn't happen often, huh?
No, it's almost like fate. Almost like we ourselves are marked by fate, you could say.
As usual, we're going to be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point. So if you have not yet read chapter 1115, be sure to do so now for free on the Viz website or the Shonen Jump app, which we link both in the show notes as always. But of course, all the new One Piece chapters, they are available to read for free for up to 3 weeks after they initially come out. But if you subscribe to Shonen Jump, which Travis and I are subscribed, you can just read them whenever you want, including all of One Piece. We definitely recommend you check that out if you're interested. Now, Travis, before we get into it, and there's a lot to get into, I don't even want to do too much. I don't want to do a big thing, but I do want to say, it is related to the fact that we do have a Discord, and we want everybody to go to our Discord and have fun in the Discord, and it's linked in the show notes. And we have an email as well, rookiepiratradio@gmail.com. I'll say it 2 more times, rookiepiratradio@gmail.com. Let me take a sip, rookiepiratradio@gmail.com. Now, the reason that I'm shortcutting everything is because this is going to be our first. John is probably going to be inebriated during this conversation, only because I have a beer in front of me. The way that this worked out, and it's John time, it's John sharing his life. I have burned 2,053 calories today, and I haven't eaten a lot today. So drinking this beer is probably going to put me in a state. And you're probably listening and you're like, John, why are you doing that? You're not Zoro. Well, thanks for reminding me. But at the same time, I do have to make it clear that I'm not very hungry. And my hope is that this beer is going to make me hungry. That's what we're doing, because I know I'm supposed to be eating, and I don't want to have a problem. So, Travis, I hope you understand and you don't hate me too much.
Honestly, what I would counter with is burning that many calories and then immediately drinking a nice, tall, cold one is the most Zoro thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, I'm in Zoro's headspace right now. All I need is green hair, and Travis, you can be my Sanji, because you're always cooking when it comes to theories.
Yeah, we're always, as you say, in that Discord, which you should join. It's in the show notes, about how I'm just there to ruin your mood all the time. It fits.
Well, speaking of being in a mood, let's say a good mood, I want to talk about Yamato's good mood, because we're going to start with our recap of the chapter. We'll do a quick recap, and then we're going to discuss everything that is in this chapter. So again, it's Pieces of a Continent. That's the title. The cover story shows us Ogre Child Yamato's Golden Harvest Surrogate Pilgrimage. The name's kind of growing on me. Volume 5.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, I know, right? The more I say it, 5 times in now. But yes, Volume 5, Hiyori and Otoko are packing me a bento lunch. Then we see Yamato being all happy, being our best friend, and Hiyori and Otoko are making some food. It's charming, it's lovely, it's a 10 out of 10. And yes, they haven't left the flower capital yet. But the funny thing is, the cover story, this does not happen often or ever. We go from the cover story to the location that the cover story is based in, presumably around the same time. We don't really know. It doesn't have to. I don't know. But we go right to the flower capital, because the main thing that happens in this chapter is we get a lot of reactions around the world to Vegapunk's ongoing message. So I'm going to do my best to recap this. It's going to be a little bit tricky because there's so many things overlapping. But yeah, we see Momonosuke, the shogun we all know, love, and sometimes tolerate. And they're all kind of like speculating on the news of like, oh, JoyBoy is a pirate. We also get the revelation that they have a Den Mushi in Wano because of Orochi. Apparently he had it in his castle. And so, yeah, we have like Momonosuke comparing JoyBoy to Luffy. So I guess it's kind of clear at this point that there wasn't like a conversation about like the Nika stuff, the Sun God stuff. We already kind of knew that. Like in Wano, they don't really know about that kind of lore. But it is interesting that Momonosuke, this is like news to him, because he did have access to Odin's journal. And so this is further confirmation that Odin didn't reveal everything in that journal. including like JoyBoy being the first pirate and stuff, because presumably Odin and the rest of the crew knew all that stuff. I'm guessing.
It's a safe bet, right? Like, this is the first time we've had something confirmed in there in a while. And maybe it's information like this that helped, or the lack of information like this that kind of led Momonosuke to be like, okay, let's hold off on breaking down some walls here.
Yes, which we did speculate in last chapter's episode of the show, where we talked about all of this kind of tying into Momonosuke having information that we didn't have when he decided to hold up on the borders. He might have saved a lot of people's lives by doing that. But anyway, so we then cut to base G4, which I think it's the debut of this base, long hinted at and rumored by the fan base. And we get a return of the former fake Luffy, Damaro Black, now masquerading as the Kid Pirates, and they're kind of goofing around saying like, oh yeah, Captain Kid, you could be JoyBoy because he's dead. And it's pretty funny. But anyway, we're still kind of going around the world. Vegapunk's message continues, and he says, I've only read from a handful of poneglyphs, but what I found there was the record of a breathtakingly vast war. JoyBoy's enemy was the world government of the present day. So no new information there, except to say that, like, yes, he was reading poneglyphs, which were, I think transcribed from Ohara. I think that's the implication, but we'll talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And then the Marines are kind of being like, oh, okay, yeah, JoyBoy was a pirate. And so, yeah, of course we were his enemy. Like, the Marines are like, yeah, that makes sense. We get a cut of Luffy and Dorian Brogy still fighting Warcury in the background of the message. And the Gorosei in general are freaking out. They're super mad about everything that's happening here. Vegapunk's message continues. More accurately, it was the precursor to the world government, a provisional army put together by 20 kingdoms known as the Alliance. So we already knew that the 20 kingdoms kind of united. That's been revealed before, but now we get another reveal that they were called the Alliance. Like, I guess it was like a formal name is the implication there. We get a shot. What's his name? Mars, right? Guy who turns into Itsumade, I want to say. I'm starting to get them mixed
that's
up.
Mars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mars, yeah. So Mars is like destroying Denden Mushi left and right. He's trying to find, there's like lots of living things that he apparently has the ability to sense them. So that's like his kind of weird yokai power. So like we've gotten revelations of like each one kind of has a weird thing about them, and I guess this is one of his. And that's that he can detect living things, which we did kind of get a hint about that. Like he was able to detect things before in previous chapters. So we then continue the message where we get, I think, our first ever true visual of JoyBoy. And JoyBoy it's like a little half a panel, but you see some characters, like it's hard to make out what they look like, but you see the silhouette of JoyBoy in the kind of awakened form that looks just like Luffy, basically. But we'll speculate that on that. I have so much to say on just a little bit of a silhouette. Let's go. I guess to be fair, because we've had the image of the sun god Nika, but to be clear, before people come after us, sun god Nika and JoyBoy, two different things. Like that is established.
Right.
Like they are not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is different than like the kind of animated thing we saw with like Who's Who, right?
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so the message continues. You might say they had no other choice, so robust was JoyBoy's faction. Without knowing the spark that caused the war, I won't say who was right or wrong. I'll simply state that two competing ideologies came head to head. As I mentioned earlier, for its time, 900 years ago, the country of JoyBoy's birth was a startlingly advanced civilization. At this point, we cut to Zou. So once the country of JoyBoy's birth is mentioned, we cut to Zou, which is kind of interesting because obviously we know that we see Zunisha, and we know that that character, of course, knows JoyBoy and has mentioned JoyBoy and apparently betrayed JoyBoy at some point. So put that in your back pocket there. And then, we see Carrot and Wanda and the rest of the Minx crew as we're getting the message even further. Vegapunk says, and the weapons that were used over the course of this 100-year conflict appear to be impossible to recreate with the latest of modern science. We then cut to, and this blew my mind, Travis, we cut to Foxy. And apparently on this like ding boat, but the things haven't been going super well for them over the last 2 years is I guess the thing, and they're kind of laughing. They're like, he's talking peanuts. And then there's like an implication that they're starving, like they can't eat, and they're a bit down on their luck. So be it. They deserve every ounce of that. Vegapunk says, even I, a humble genius, cannot replicate them. So Vegapunk's kind of saying that like this civilization was so advanced that what he's been able to do with Egghead and everything else doesn't hold a candle. And he says, and therein lies the problem. We cut to the Labo phase and we see Stussy and we see Kaku. Kaku is still kind of in not the best of moods. He's kind of like resigned to his fate, I guess, that he's going to die. Stussy is as well. And Edison mentions to her that she needs to lower the barrier and run for safety. There's no point in leaving it up because the Gorosei can just come in and out. Like, what, like it doesn't matter. So this could be the chance for Stussy to escape and maybe take pity, some mercy on Kaku. I could see her doing that for sure. And so he basically convinces her there. We get a quick shot of Saturn, who's still kind of running around trying to find the Denden Mushi as well. So it looks like they're closing in. They could be finding it at any moment, or York could be figuring it out. We don't know what's going to happen quite yet. Edison says, I've done all I can to help the Straw Hats make their escape. They can take it from there. And that's when we cut to seeing Jinbei still holding Zoro. Jinbei and Zoro haven't quite made it to the Sunny, but it looks like the next like couple of chapters, I have to think we're going to get like the grand escape. I would have to hope, especially because they're surrounded at this point. Like they need to get going. But yeah, so and I think it's going to be pretty set that that Luffy and the gang, basically the Straw Hats are going to be split up and different ships trying to get out. We'll see what happens, though. I think when it's Gorosei involved, anything could happen. So yeah, we do see Nami kind of talking about the situation, trying to get everybody to get moving, which more of like what we've been seeing over and over again. But yeah, we do have this like quick little emo thing where Stussy apparently has been listening to a little bit too much My Chemical Romance. She's like, without Stella around, who do I live for? And it's like, all right, grow up. I'm just joking. She'll be fine. I think she's gonna have a nice little little moment. We'll get that soon enough. Yeah. But yeah, so we then get another shot of Bonnie and Sanji and Frankie and Oimo and Kashi. I always mess up their names, but they're still trying to fight off Nusjuro and Nusjuro, however you say it. And Bonnie is running out of steam. She has been using Distorted Future and it's starting to wear off, but they are just barely able to like hold off Nusjuro for the moment. He cuts off at one point the figurehead of one of the giant ships. And then Vegapunk's message continues once again. She says, the Void Century came to a close with the defeat of JoyBoy. And then we pointedly see an image of the Iron Giant and Zunisha. And then we do get a shot of Nusjuro starting to lose it. He leaves the battle, jumps into the air, and does what is probably the most impressive move yet, and that's saying something for any of the Gorosei, and that's he basically slices the Labo phase in half, which is something that makes me wonder, like, okay, is this the world's greatest swordsman? Are we going to get a thing where he's going to defeat Mihawk and then Zoro's real challenger is going to be this guy? I mean, I hope so. That'd be interesting. But anyway, Vegapunk continues, but not before leaving vast permanent scars of war across the face of the world. By the way, we do see that the Seraphim apparently have escaped along with some of the Cypher Pull agents that were trapped. It looks like they might be getting out after all. So interesting that we check in with them finally. Vegapunk says, the world is made up of a series of islands. Sailing between them is difficult, and many people never experience anything but their own culture at home. And then people like in different places are like, yeah, duh. Like everybody knows that. But Vegapunk continues. He's just establishing. He says, but this shared understanding of the world does not necessarily apply to the world of 1,000 years ago, because a cataclysm occurred during the Void Century. It's at this point that we see Zoro's hometown and his old sensei still training away, doing their thing. Fun to see them in post-SBS revealing their backstory. And then Vegapunk says, causing the world to sink once before, we are currently living on the pieces of a continent that existed long ago. So all the people saying that, One Piece is like referring to the world being one piece, they're eating good. They're having a good time this week because that's been a long running thing. And we also see what looks like an underground like city, something that we haven't, I don't think, seen before. It kind of reminds me of Impel Down. We'll talk about it. We've been getting more and more glimpses of these sorts of things ever since we had the first revelation that Vegapunk said the world was going to sink into the sea. We've been just getting these shots that Oda has been flexing on these panels. We see the Revolutionary Army react to this, including Ivankov and the commanders just kind of like losing it in shock and surprise. Sabo's looking quite serious. And then Vegapunk says, the world of a millennium ago now slumbers unseen at the bottom of the sea. In fact, one can assume that in the past, there were a number of continents we know nothing about. And so we also go to Orangetown or not Orangetown. What was the name of Nami's? I keep wanting to say the places that it's on. Not Arlong Park. Cocoa Village?
Cocoa Village.
That's what it is, yeah. I forget the name of the island itself, but Cocoa Village. We see Nojiko, and she's just like, you can fill me in later. I got to check on these tangerines, and I can relate. Vegapunk says, if the world were still the same as it was in the past, then the act of erasing 100 years of history would be simply unthinkable and impossible. However, it makes much more sense when you understand that the rise in sea level over that century was 200 meters. So we see the Marines kind of freaking out at like 200 meters, especially because we saw so much chaos and havoc over 5 meters earlier in this arc. And some even remarks like, these gigantic battleships are only 60 meters long. No wonder the whole world vanished. But yeah, they're all kind of being like, oh yeah, don't listen to Vegapunk. We just gotta, whatever. And then so we get the dialogue that Marines are going to try to rescue Cypherpole and Seraphim. Apparently they saw them. So I think that's been tidied up there. But yeah, we go back to Mocktown, which is interesting. We haven't been going back to the same places that often, but Mocktown we do, which I think is kind of funny and interesting, and who knows what else. But they're just like, oh, there's no way any of that's true. Vegapunk, you old hoot and a half. That's what I imagine they're saying. We also go to Cherry Blossom Kingdom, where Chopper's from. And so we see, what's his face? What's his name? Duval? Not Duval.
Dalton.
Dalton, yeah, I knew it started with the D. He's kind of like, oh, yeah, how could that happen? And then even Chopper's old mentor, who's like, supposed to be like, 150 years old or whatever. She's just like, there's so much to learn about the world, even still. And yeah, so more people are talking about like how, that mountain over there is just 200 meters tall. We're in Alabasta at this point. And then we go to Water 7. So we see the Galley Law shipwrights. Vegapunk says, as for why the sea level rose so much during that century, it would be natural to assume the work of a sudden natural disaster, but I can state for a fact, this was a man-made disaster. And so the Galley Law folks are like, what? And then we cut to the World Economic Journal with Big News Morgan and Vivi and Wapple. And that's just crazy, but then Vivi hushes him because she's our queen. And Vegapunk says, if such a cataclysm were caused by natural forces, then the initial disaster would have spanned several centuries and inflicted slow but continual damage upon the world. But by any measurement, climatology, geology, environmental and atmosphere science, the dramatic shift could not have happened within a single century. So the cause is something else. And when I detected the rise in worldwide sea levels the other day, I had my answer. We're back to Egghead. We see the Gorosei. They are so fed up because they know something big is coming. He says, I knew the cause and confirmed its existence. The ancient weapons that sank the world into the sea 800 years ago still exist today and await the moment that they stir once again. In other words, the vast war that arose during the Void Century never came to an end. We see a shot of some butterflies, Emu, and Emu's face. End of chapter. I'm taking a sip.
Drink it in. Take a moment. You've earned it.
That was a lot. History class with Vegapunk. Don't be late.
Yeah. While you're letting that all sink in, what I want to zero in on first is not a specific aspect of the chapter, but rather the overall vibe that I have taken away from this and Vegapunk's message and everything else, which is specifically that there's a lot less of this that is surprising or shocking. You mentioned it multiple times during your recap here. We're getting a lot of confirmation, but we're not getting a lot of, brand new revelation.
Yes.
Like you compare this to Gear 5th, for example, is probably the best, most recent example of like a big twist in the story. That's not what we're getting here. What we're getting is, to pull from the title, of course, the pieces really falling into place. And while I haven't seen a lot of this be the chatter online, I do think that this is something that some people may feel a little bit disappointed on. Because there is this idea. Really?
Yeah. I was a little disappointed. Really? I felt like it was like I like this chapter because there's a lot of fan service in this, but I felt like the message aspect of this was a little bit like, give us something. Like all we kind of really got were like quantifying of like things we already know. I mean, that's it. Like we know that the world sank at this point, but it's like now we know it's 200 meters. Cool. There wasn't that much. I don't know. I feel like we could have gotten some morsel. Like the war's still going on. Shocker.
My point with this though is that's I think this is actually a good thing overall, because instead of, I mean, let's be honest. This is particularly worth noting in Jump right now because two of its biggest series are literally within weeks of ending potentially. And ending a series is the hardest thing to do for many reasons, in large part because you never know how many chapters you're actually even going to get in the magazine to do it, much less that you'll ever make it that far to begin with. And in the case of One Piece, this is kind of the only series of its kind where it's been given the bandwidth to do all of this in the way that it ultimately sees fit. Like we've long passed the time where like an editor can really stop Oda from doing something very clearly. So it's all pretty much at this point whatever he wants to do. So the fact of the matter being that this all makes sense, this jives with our understanding of the world, this clicks with our own theories, we're seeing things confirmed, we're seeing other things deconfirmed, we're seeing other theories kind of getting kicked down the river, and I'm sure we have plenty more that we're going to raise as we go on through this. The fact that it all fits together so well, I think, is a testament to this particular manga in Shonen Jump getting the bandwidth to get there versus just about any other series I can think of in the same genre. Because you're not excited or hyped necessarily right now. I do think there's more to the message. I think there's a big reveal. For example, why does this require a visual snail? We still don't have that answer. But the fact that we're just sitting here going, yep, we understand. Everybody else is getting this information now. And it clicks, it fits in. That is a feat of world building that is noteworthy in and of itself. I have zero complaints about any of this, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind as we keep going here, because the story's not going to get bigger. If anything, seeing some of the characters we saw in this chapter has really put this kind of sense in my heart that we are even closer to the end than I thought we were. We are very, very quickly, like if NL gets a cameo next week, how many arcs do we actually have left is now where I am sitting. Because at this point, we don't need to dedicate a whole arc to breaking down the science of this, which might be something Oda would have done 10 years ago. We don't need to. We're doing it now. We're doing all of this other stuff now. We've taken at least 2 major players off the board this arc. And that's not counting the Gorosei entering things properly. So at this point, it really does feel like, all right, we're locking the pieces in. We're going to go take care of some other stuff. We could be heading towards the end in the next couple of years. And not in like couple of years Oda time. I mean, actual couple of years, which is kind of, I don't know how to feel. It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking, but I am not worried. And this kind of chapter where all of this just kind of fits into place and just sits comfortably, that's again, it's a testament to the world building, which a lot of people love about this series. And this is why everything just kind of clicks. Despite the fact that it is a manga about a rubber band man, here we are. All of this clicks in.
I'll just say, for me, it's less a complaint and more of an expression of yearning. And that being, there was just like, I don't know, 1 or 2 nuggets or subversions I was kind of hoping for, and I let myself be disappointed. But here's the thing.
I don't think we're done. I don't think this is it.
No. I think the message is going to keep going for 1 or 2 more chapters, but I think we're getting close. And I will say that when it comes to like going around the world, revisiting characters, I'm having the best time, just reading this because it is so fun, chaotic, and exciting. And it's an exciting chapter. It's well done. And it's, the interspersing of everything is just, yeah, I mean, it's a victory lap. It feels like we're watching, a trailer for the final saga that's happening right now. That's kind of the vibe in some ways. And we do get like some minor revelations. I don't want to be unkind. I mean, we see a real silhouette of JoyBoy, and we see some silhouettes that look kind of interesting. And I think some of the more fun I've been having in the aftermath of this chapter, since since I read the Raws and we've been kind of like, dishing it out in the Discord, has just been the kind of the theorizing in the aftermath. There are way fewer bad theories that I've seen. And I put out my big One Piece theory, and I feel like we'll have to talk about it out of obligation. And I'm feeling very confident in a couple of things that I think the story could be going in. And yeah, in that aspect, I think all good. It's all good. I mean, look, any chapter with fake Luffy and that gang, I mean, what's there to complain about?
Oh my goodness. This is Foxy's first canonical appearance in 20 years. It's what it feels like. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like that.
It feels like that, yeah.
It might be.
That was like 2000.
Actually.
That might have been like, 2005, 2000, something like that, huh? Because yeah, Foxy's shown up in the anime, but not the manga. The anime has like found like little things in, including I think 1 or 2 movies. But yeah, so was there anything you wanted to talk about specifically in the chapter? I have a lot I want to talk about in terms of theories and kind of using the information in this chapter. I don't have a lot to talk about in terms of the chapter itself, though, except for things that relate to the chapter. But what do you think?
There are a couple things that I want to zero in on. The first is the Gorosei, the ones that we see taking actions here.
They're big mad.
Because they're big mad, and you mentioned that they're using their powers a little bit differently than we're used to, and that's a great catch, because it looks like, for example, Mars is using Conqueror's Haki to disable all those snails, but we go to Nusjuro later on in the chapter, and in his, like it seems to be like in his own mind, he's like, they mention bio responses. He's like, there's bio responses. Is that observation Haki? That's what it seems like, but it's not really in a way we've ever done before. Like, is he trying to use observation Haki on all of the Labo phase to try to find the snail that's broadcasting this? And if it is, and it's just like that's how he's, displaying that power in his own mind, I like that that's more kind of indication that, like, the Gorosei don't see themselves as the same kind of beings as the people they're fighting.
Well, that's the thing.
This idea, it's like.
Well, that's how he found the Kuma pacifistas, right? Because, like, how did he find them and eliminate them so quickly? He's able to detect them, like a radar or something.
It's gotta be, right? Yeah.
But he seems to share that with Mars.
Yeah. Are they sharing this together? Is that actually... This is one of the things where, like, I think the anime is just going to have to help us out here.
Yeah, where it's going to, like, color in the lines a little bit, give us a fuller picture and an Oda-approved glimpse into what's really happening. Because, yeah, it is difficult to piece a lot of this stuff out, and we'll probably have the answers by the time the anime comes out, or maybe. I mean, who knows, actually.
Yeah. I mean, geez, the anime could really take and run this out, if you know what I mean. But we'll see. I like to think that they're doing a lot better these days, but you never know. I guess it depends on how many breaks Oda takes between now and then. But that's kind of an interesting thing. We still just don't know how they work, which is wild to think about, but it's still super, super, super weird.
Any locations you feel like you still want to like go to that we haven't yet? I mean, I feel like we've been to a lot of them. I don't remember going to Dressrosa.
No,
we haven't checked in on the Grand Fleet.
We went to Dressrosa.
Oh, did we?
Back.
Was it a quick
top
thing?
Of it? It was quick because it was because Leo is still there. That's how we knew where some of the Grand Fleet was.
That wasn't during the message, right? That was
no, because they said Luffy. He's like, Luffy was just there and now he's dead, and that stuff. So
I guess I forgot. But okay.
So we've been there. There's not been enough time to like assemble the Grand Fleet.
I want to see Harujin. I want to see Cavendish. I want to see the gang. See all the boys.
I feel like we won't see Harujin until after we're done here, because I'm assuming the giant pirates get reported about here, and that might be where he finds out that they've reformed. That seems kind of reasonable. We haven't seen some of the others, though. You're right. And in terms of islands, I mean, at this point, like, does Oda start putting in like movie characters for fun? Like, does he throw another? Like, we're running out of stuff. We've visited everybody at this point. Like we've got our Foxy.
We haven't visited some of the Roger crew. I think that's
true.
Coming.
We have
We haven't visited Rayleigh. We haven't visited Crocus.
Have we not visited Crocus?
I don't remember.
I thought we did do Crocus.
Did we visit Laboon?
I want to say we did.
Maybe we
check
did
now. I need to check now. I have to be sure. I don't think we've seen Rayleigh though. That much I do believe.
Maybe Oda's saving
I would
Rayleigh.
think it's weird because we haven't seen the Emperors. I think is the more interesting. Like we've seen.
Yeah, we haven't seen Shanks.
We haven't seen Shanks's reaction. Yes, confirmed. Crocus and Laboon are seeing the message.
Oh, okay, fair enough then.
So they have shown up, but we haven't seen.
But Shanks would be good, and Buggy too. Yeah,
we haven't seen the Emperor reactions at all. Which I've seen this floated. I think this was on Grand Line Review that he believes that's probably intentional to save those reactions for the end, since that's probably what really kicks. My guess is whatever Vegapunk has at the end here is what kicks the race for the One Piece off properly. Because right now we have everybody getting ready to do it. Shanks is moving. Luffy is obviously moving. Blackbeard has made some very big moves, but not necessarily ones that get him to the One Piece, save for taking, besides the attack on Whole Cake. You know, there's not a whole lot that gets him closer to the One Piece specifically. But now we have all these pieces in place. I think what Vegapunk drops is basically like, for lack of a better term, the firing bullet to start the sprint. Like, let's get this going. And
no, I agree. That
would be where you throw all the Emperors at it. So that seems like, except Luffy, of course. Luffy's here already. But that would be probably the way to end this, is tell us what they're doing next. So maybe that's where it is. I do think that this is over once the message is over, or just like right as the message ends. I kind of hope so. I don't know how much more we can pull out here.
Yeah. Now, okay. I know a lot of speculation is now getting kicked up about the confirmation that, yes, the world was Pangea. There were continents. I mean, that's been such a remarked upon theory at this point that it almost feels like, oh yeah, I guess that's technically a revelation, right? And now we're starting to see more people kind of talk about like, okay, well, how much of it's Pangea? Like, you know, is the red line actually artificial or not? Because the Lunarians apparently lived on top of it. So how does that necessarily work? And so a lot of that stuff's coming about. I do want to know kind of your take on the underwater stuff and like the whole, like, there's an ocean, or there are cities like at the bottom of the ocean. Because my first thought was like Fishman Island is also at the bottom of the sea. So why is that civilization still intact, but the fishmen presumably haven't really like found these other places? Like, I don't know. Are they below the calm belt or something? Like, how does that work? I'm honestly like kind of fascinated with that, because we don't have a lot of confirmed like fishmen civilizations around the world. We know about Fishman Island, and that's basically it, right?
So you bring up Fishman Island, where I would say Fishman Island is one of the places where we had it first really indicated that there is stuff underneath the ocean. It's always been kind of implied because there's always stuff under the ocean in like pirate stories, because that's fun. It adds mystery, sunken treasure, you know, it's kind of an aspect of it.
Matey, there be treasure at the bottom of the ocean deep. Exactly.
Davy Jones' locker, you know, yada, yada, yada. But the cover story for Jinbei right after Fishman Island does see him find a poneglyph while he's traveling to Big Mom, and they're going through, you know, kind of ancient sunken stuff. And those are big hints kind of confirming, okay, we have stuff at the bottom of the ocean. As to what's unique about Fishman Island, as you noted in our Discord, that is the first hint of JoyBoy named as a character, and that promise being made that couldn't be fulfilled. I think it's still a safe bet that there was either some sort of prejudice or other societal factor that kept fishmen in this region, and moving them was a task.
That's not my theory.
Whether that's like racism, I know what your theory is, but you can counterpoint me. Yeah, whether that's racism or it's something else, but the fact that the Noah is there to move them from that place implies that they've been there the whole time, at least to me.
All right, I'm putting on my apron. I'm firing up this pan. All right, let's put some butter. So
we know what happens. We know what happens when Zoro cooks, everybody.
There you go. Why couldn't I have been Sanji at the beginning? Look, here we go. Okay. I am fairly convinced at this point that the ancient kingdom was, as many have speculated, Atlantis. And not just Atlantis, like the One Piece Atlantis, but essentially the Fishmen ran everything. They were in charge. They were the world government. And I think what this is all leading to is that JoyBoy was basically the prince of like Atlantis. He was a fishman. He was probably a rather large fishman, but not a giant, not a buccaneer, but a fishman. And I think that the Fishman ancient kingdom was in one location and they never got to use the Noah, but a lot of them were wiped out and had to relocate to Fishman Island and be subjugated for the rest. Because to me, them being subjugated in the before times doesn't make a lot of sense. But it does kind of make sense if, and then let me bring up the actual theory because I wrote it down. I took some notes, and I think that this could be something. Okay.
He was doing his homework, folks.
Yeah. You know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So I said the ancient kingdom had many races. So like I would say like the Lunarians and all that, the Minks. They created the ancient weapons to destroy parts of the world to make it smaller so it would flood. Because think of it this way. Why does the water rise? Like, where does the water come from? You know what I mean? Like, it's not just going to come from nowhere. And so, like, Oda's clearly doing, like, Noah's Ark and everything, like, making the rains fall and everything. But what we're seeing is that apparently the ancient weapons cause this. The only way, there was that hollow world theory that people were talking about that I think is really interesting. The idea is that if you blast away at like the world itself and make the world shrink, then you flood it. And so JoyBoy was a fishman who ultimately left them become the first. He wanted to become the first pirate, but then his crew betrayed him to start the world government. So I think that like basically JoyBoy's like circle of people betrayed him because he was affiliated with the ancient kingdom, and the ancient kingdom wanted to sink the entire world originally. And I think that's why there's so much attention on the world government and like this clash not necessarily being like good and evil, because the ancient kingdom probably wanted to do something very evil because the fishmen would have everything to gain by the world sinking. But then in the aftermath of this war and JoyBoy's defeat and all of that, the aftermath is that the fishmen end up being subjugated for some reason, and they still lose. But the idea is that Emu and the Gorosei, like, they didn't, want any of this, like, they didn't want to necessarily sink the world, or maybe they did. But the idea is that they're taking advantage of the situation. And the reason they don't want people to know the name of the ancient kingdom is because they don't want people to know that the fishmen were this advanced civilization. But I think that is it. I think that is the one, because I don't know. Also Poseidon and that stuff. And the fact that JoyBoy, the first time JoyBoy is mentioned is Fishman Island, it's like such a hint that he's a fishman. I'm just saying. So what's at the top of Zoe? What's at the top of Zoe? Is it a tree shaped like a giant? Travis, is it shaped like a buccaneer? Is it shaped like a mink? No, it's shaped like a whale. Shaped like a whale, Travis. A whale. That's like a fishman thing.
It is shaped like a whale. I won't argue with you on that. I do want to push back on something though, and that is this idea. No, this idea of betrayal. I want to talk about this because I'm either an idiot and missed something, or everyone else has hallucinated something, and I am the only one living in reality. So tell me what it is. Why does everyone think that JoyBoy was betrayed by his crew?
Well, he apologizes at one point, and Zunisha apologizes to JoyBoy. The Iron Giant apologizes to JoyBoy. So it's not that it's been confirmed, but I think it's an implication.
They failed. Of course they're apologizing.
They failed, but I think that there's more to it. I think that I get the implication that like they turned on him. honestly.
I don't.
You don't think
that.
so?
I think that's extrapolation.
It is. Yeah, it for sure is.
The reason that I bring all of that up, I think it's important to know what's what, because what's very specific. Like we talked about this last week, and I want to go back to it because I think it's something that Oda is very. Now I'm certain Oda is very specifically obfuscating this. If the ancient weapons were technology made by the kingdom, which seems to be the implication right now, why? That's
they want to sink the world.
But is sinking the world good?
For Fishman, it is. That's kind of where my theory came from.
Then does that make JoyBoy bad?
I think by affiliation. I think that his conflict is that he is like the heir to a twisted and corrupt like monarchy, and he wanted to break free from it. He wanted to be like an Odin or a Vivi or something like that. And I think ultimately he failed to basically, like, I think he was kind of in between, because there was like one side and this other side, and Vegapunk's painting it as like JoyBoy was on one side. But I think the fact that he's a pirate kind of gives you the sense that he wasn't really on anybody's side. I think that he was on the side of the ancient kingdom by default and his heritage and all of that. And it came down to some kind of conflict that he felt obligated to, instead of, I don't know. Again, it's extrapolation, like you said, but that's the vibe that I'm getting, is that he's caught between these two very difficult ideals, or these like two ideals that don't mesh together.
Yeah, and ideals is a very specific thing. Now, putting this in Vegapunk's hands for him to go, I don't have empirical evidence, I'm a scientist, so I will not, that tracks with his character and everything we've done so far with him.
Yeah, Vegapunk is Joe Manchin.
Fine.
Yeah.
But to me, what that, from a overall narrative standpoint, what that suggests to me is whatever the ideology of these two warring factions were, that is the overarching, issue, which tracks with One Piece as a series, because oftentimes it's not really about specifically the crime someone is doing. Luffy isn't really punching out Kaido for helping usurp a ruler and doing all this stuff. He's punching Kaido because the things he did made people starve. It's way more simple for him as a character. And so it's often about just overall will, not necessarily specific action. And the fact that that's the detail being held back here, the one thing that can't be clarified, is, I think, really, really important here. So we really don't want to go, well, he was betrayed, because, again, it's not super clear that like, JoyBoy was necessarily aspirational. It seems like that's the case because of the direct connection to Luffy, him being the first pirate, and what that means. But I do like this idea as well that whatever JoyBoy's ideology and goals were aren't exactly the same as Luffy's. Mm-hmm. Because that kind of does avoid the Chosen One thing that we're still kind of tiptoeing around, which admittedly, because Luffy could stretch his toes out however he needs to, he does a really good job of, but there's still that to avoid. And the sheer reality of, we are eventually going to have to put a capstone on this. We are eventually going to have to sit Luffy down and explain all of this to him. Because while all of this is going on, that's cool and all, he himself still doesn't really know what it means. He's hearing it, presumably, but he's distracted. And let's face it, if it's not over a plate of meat and directly in his face, and Robin is not the one telling him about it, he's not paying attention. He doesn't care. Eventually, we have to make him care. And so I think it's going to come down to that ideology. If the world is flooded, that is, that does technically open the world up more, but it also takes away a lot of comfort from people. Not everybody wants to be a pirate, which is notably something Luffy has observed as okay. Being a pirate isn't for everyone, but if you want to, he'll come pick you up. He has no problems with letting people live their lives. So I just find myself kind of torn back and forth over, this is exactly what it was. I don't think we have enough to go off of yet, because we've had this giant detail dropped on us that the ancient weapons are in fact the reason the world is the way that it is, but they're being co-opted, presumably. And if so, what was their original purpose? one of these weapons is a living being. How does that work? Did they create that? Which brings me to the JoyBoy race conversation. So we know the Lunarians had like special bloodline traits, and we know that there are special things about the Buccaneers. Is it possible, may I offer, that the Buccaneers are themselves a modified race, like they modified their own bloodline traits to get to the forms that they are?
I don't know. I don't see anything pointing at that.
Not specifically, no, but just in the, who is JoyBoy? I still think Buccaneer is a possibility, just because that was also introduced here. Like that's kind of rolling in parallel with everything else. Kuma, being the descendant of Buccaneers, actually has the Nika myth down to a science. They're kind of intentionally like the slave above slaves, even more than Fishman. So it kind of makes sense that they're the ones keeping the light on if he is a part of them. But, I mean, why not just kill them all if you're the world government?
Because,
you know what I mean?
I think, honestly, if I had to kind of like put things together, I see JoyBoy as a character who wants to be friends with people of different races, but he's in a place of a privileged position where he is like this kind of higher up monarchy person in this like Atlantis type civilization. And he wants to break away from that. And I think that over the course of his adventures, he eventually has to like make a decision, and he ultimately makes a mistake. He sides with the ancient kingdom, which is doing something objectively evil. And I think that makes the story more interesting, that the ancient kingdom wasn't good. And basically that the people who fought against it were good, but then decided that like, well, we need to make sure that an ancient kingdom doesn't happen again. And that's kind of like the basis of it. We're going to get everybody together and we're going to do all this stuff. But then for whatever reason, there's like a group of people who decide, or there's like a small group of people who decide that they're still going to like, well, we still need to like consolidate power for us or whatever. And that's kind of where I'm coming from with it, where I think that ultimately JoyBoy let down, himself and basically made the wrong decision. And essentially that I think that the reason I lean more toward him being a Fishman in general is because like with the story itself, it makes so much sense with like why the Fishmen are so subjugated the way that they are, but are still able to thrive, because it's really hard to like fully get rid of them. They must have been extremely powerful at one point for them to essentially like have, the numbers and the influence that they do still somehow have at this point. So I don't know. I think that obviously, the grain of salt that I'm pinching over this dish is just that. I do have my big One Piece theory, but I thought maybe we could read a few comments first, and I'll tease it. Travis, is that okay? How we can do it?
Keep them on the hook.
Yeah. You got to keep listening for the special prize, the toy in the box. Okay, so Xavier Price said, "I fully expected a flashback to start this chapter. Oda's just dangling the carrot out for us. Speaking of carrot, it's nice to see her again, and Ivankov and so many other old and new faces popping up. I love that Oda can just do that. Show people that haven't been in the story in decades, and it feels so nostalgic and instantly recognizable." Travis, I don't expect a flashback happening. I feel like we've already gotten plenty. But do you think, I know it's possible, but like, do you think it's likely we're going to get something like that?
I hope not. I know people are really chomping at the bit for this, but I think we're getting to a point now where like, I said it earlier, what else can we do here to stretch this egghead thing out? We're at that point in the story, like pace wise, where if we do slap another flashback on or another big twist or something like that, I think it's going to be received poorly. It's that Wano effect where you are in a place for long enough, and
even
we're
the
not.
Kaido flashback was like not even. It was just like a few panels here and there toward the end of that fight.
Mm-hmm. And back then, I would say 100% that even Oda was ready to move on. All things considered. And I still think we'll see Kaido again, at least in flashback form, to kind of fill that out. But
we already have, sure.
we're getting to that point now where we're really, because we're closing the doors on things. We're kind of narrowing the focus to get us to that final part of the story. The more we tack on now is just going to make this feel bloated in retrospect, and I don't think anybody wants that. Really, I don't think everyone. I think people want answers. So this has been great, but we really got to wrap this up and move on, guys.
Primal X3 said, One Piece continues to prove why it's a masterpiece time and time again. I wasn't expecting Tomorrow Black and crew to ever reappear again. Some groundbreaking revelations since Vegapunk began, such as with the 200-meter rise in the past, and now with the reveal of JoyBoy being from an advanced kingdom, and the world government being originally the Alliance, formed from 20 countries. I'm guessing despite being inferior in technology, the ancient kingdom made up for it with having lots of powerful devil fruit users. Do you think that's the case, Travis? Do you think devil fruit users were around during the Void Century? Because we do know that JoyBoy had one, but like I'm kind of wondering how that figures into it, because when in my big like theory cooking, I didn't really talk about devil fruits and emu and like how all that stuff might be playing around. When you think about it, like sinking the world is like a good motivation if you want to
a good motivation.
Inhibit the power of devil fruit users, isn't it?
It is. I saw Artur because he, I love Artur's work, but you can definitely tell when he's pushing a very specific agenda in his chapter recaps, because you can see him kind of extrapolate out, and he's like, well, this would be a perfectly, like he had that exact same thing. He's like, if Emu was in fact the sea devil, it would make sense to want to sink the world so that devil fruit users have a weakness. I do think that devil fruits had to have existed then, because while we have the Vegapunk explanation now where it's people wished and they came to be, there's probably some science involved in this, some One Piece science involved in their creation that we haven't gotten to yet, because it can be replicated. It has bloodline elements to it. Some of these have willpower. So either they're magic or there's One Piece science to it. And a lot of One Piece science has been able to explain the magic so far. So I feel like that's probably going to go hand in hand, and the Ancient Kingdom probably had a hand in creating devil fruits, not just had them. And they probably would be crazy powerful compared to now, because there's less water, hypothetically. But JoyBoy also went to sea, which is interesting. Yeah. It's specifically called out that he went to sea. So not to give Artur too much credit here, but did the devil fruits always be weak to water? ? Who knows?
Who knows? I want to say yeah, but we don't know for sure. Kithara said, glad I've stuck with this story long enough to have the extremely obvious theory I cooked up at age 9 after playing Wind Waker is confirmed 20 years later. I saw a bunch of people mentioning Wind Waker, which I think is pretty funny, especially because, Legend of Zelda, Japan, and people have been speculating about the One Piece world being this way for a long time, and Wind Waker, play that game and maybe you'll see a few funny overlapping threads there.
Like I said, it's one of those things where it makes significant sense in retrospect, and that's why I think it's great.
Simba Crown said this was a huge waste of time, ink, data, brain power, etc. This chapter told us zero of anything we hadn't learned from previous chapters and had extremely minimal development or advancement of any plot points. However, Homerman76 responded, we never had any of this officially confirmed before. Sure, we had several hints dropped, but that's completely different from knowing the reality of the situation. Get off your high horse. A little bit of drama. People are spicing over here, but that's how it happens.
I said I hadn't seen any of that, but I kind of anticipated it. It's good to remember, guys, that we are readers of the story, and we may not be omniscient like the narrator or the author, but we do operate with significantly more understanding than characters. It's the plot hole dilemma, right? Where you're watching a horror movie and then you see somebody do something that doesn't make sense, and you're like, well, I would never do that. And it's like, you're also not being chased by Jason Voorhees. You know what I mean?
Nico Majin C said, the sea levels rose 200 meters over 100 years. It was a man-made disaster. It sounds like a devil fruit gone out of control. A Logia devil fruit user? Maybe the water fruit? What do you think, Travis? Think they got something there?
Is Poseidon a devil fruit that's been passed down through bloodline elements?
You can even inherit a devil fruit? Sure.
Could you?
Why not?
I
guess.
Could you wish to inherit a devil fruit? Is that possible?
Yeah. The inherit no me. Inherit.
Yeah, right?
I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. Why is there only one of every devil fruit kind? if they were something that could be produced, wouldn't you mass produce those?
There's got to be limits. I mean, it's like the nature of yeah.
Like I said, it's one of those things where we're still missing some details.
Yes. Hero 2 Anime said, "Dang, and this is the first arc of the final saga. It's really setting the stage for the end game and giving us all this lore." Still, I think Oda might get downplayed a bit this summer with My Hero Academia coming to an end. He really needs to hit hard with 2 or 3 more big reveals. I don't know. It's One Piece. One Piece, Travis, is an institution. I feel like, yes, My Hero Academia, it's going to have its moment, but it's the One Piece fandom kind of dwarfs My Hero. I mean, let's just say it. I love My Hero Academia, sure, but
I have many thoughts about what could be going through Shonen Jump editorial's head, knowing what it knows, which is more than we know. For example, they have a better idea of where Oda is in the story than we do. And in terms of other series, I mentioned this earlier, it's hard to end a series. My Hero Academia is not the only series that could end within weeks. We're probably like 2 weeks away from Hero Aka as of this recording, but like it's not the only one that will probably end before you know it. We're looking at JJK almost certainly wrapping up before the year is done. And I would say at least one more that's just had an anime adaptation could end.
Everyone's been on their toes, Travis, since Domestic Girlfriend ended. I mean, where do you go after that?
What do you do? What does Shonen Jump do? Because Shonen Jump is, I could get on this. I could get on this forever, but the long and short of it is Shonen Jump is in a place that it has never been before, and that is kind of on the back foot. It's publishing a lot of really popular series, but a lot of those popular series are not in the magazine. Spy Family's not in the magazine. Chainsaw Man, especially after last week's chapter, is not in the magazine. Kaiju number 8's not in the magazine. Those are big anime hits right now. That I think they're still to this day reeling from the backlash that they did to themselves by not taking Attack on Titan 10 years ago, almost 15 years ago now. So what do you do? Like, they have mega hits, but those mega hits are closing a lot faster. Demon Slayer's time in the sun, from their perspective, is over and done with. Like, Shueisha, completely happy with Demon Slayer. Totally fine. But that Demon Slayer being a big thing in anime and merchandising and everything doesn't sell Shonen Jump volumes. And Shonen Jump readership is still good, but it's good, I mean, in large part, because of One Piece. The digital model is working, though. So is this a moment where the magazine really starts to pivot? Do they try to find another Hero Aka? Is that even a good idea? Because Hero Aka today is very different than Hero Aka of when it was at its peak. And tell John in the Discord if you want an episode about that after it ends, let us know. But what does the magazine do is a really, really big question that they are going to have to figure out. And I don't know that everything they're throwing at the wall right now is going to do it.
Darkuro said, "Do you think maybe when Goldie Roger was talking about One Piece, he was misquoted? And he was really saying One Piece, like P-E-A-C-E, as in the world needs to be one to have peace. Like, once everything is at peace, all can get the treasures and everything they desire." It's a big stretch on my part, but maybe? I think the thing to remember
this is
Japanese.
One Piece is one of those words in Japanese. It is very specific, yes.
Not to be condescending, because Oda does puns with English plenty of times, but I think in this case, you kind of have to take a step back and be like, all right, yes, puns, but you kind of have to start from a place of like Japanese puns, because that's usually his bread and his butter. Tarek C said, "It's surreal how much this feels like the end of the series. Every chapter has been more chilling than the one before lately, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. The world isn't ready for Emu's face reveal." I'm glad. I know I was complaining before, Travis, that we didn't get anything big, but I don't want Emu's face quite yet, because I think that it's not going to be a big reveal until, I have a feeling it's going to hit when it's going to hit, and I want Oda to save that ammunition for when it counts.
Do you think Emu looks like someone we already know?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Why do you have a guess?
Shadow their face this long,
They could look like a monster. They could look monstrous. That's totally
They could look
feasible.
like the human version of the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. Now that would be surprising.
That would be surprising. This is going to sound really silly, what if it's not a silhouette and that's just what he looks like his default power form? Like that's just like he's literally an oozing like dark monster thing. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I like that idea.
It's probably silly. It's probably silly enough to work, but I think that'd be anticlimactic. But it's possible. Who do you think he looks like, though? If he looks like someone we know,
he looks like you, Travis.
Oh no,
he looks like all of us.
That's unfortunate for him.
JoyBoy Monkey D. Luffy said, "Why do I feel like the ancient civilization is our present time with computers, AI, etc.? And due to the big flood, humanity got way back to the time when we don't have this type of technology. So basically, One Piece is a story about how humanity's technology went back in time, but in reality, what we in 2024 people are experiencing actually already happened in this story, making this story, One Piece, the future of our current era." That's something that's been done. I'd say that Wheel of Time is one of the more famous examples. Although Wheel of Time is a little bit coy about that idea. But yeah, the idea of like the post-apocalypse Planet of the Apes, like, you know, I feel like for Oda, it's a little basic. And I also don't think it's like the One Piece world just doesn't function like ours. I don't like the idea of them being the same. I want to escape. It's kind of like with Avatar, The Last Airbender, like it's just its own world. It's got its own rules. It's got its own thing. I like it the way it is.
I'm a big meta analysis fan. I like meta textual stuff. I like commenting on the medium itself. But it's like when Oda had to come out and be like, no, the One Piece is really a thing. It's kind of fun to speculate that it's something more, deeper, and I'm sure that it will be thematically. But like the One Piece is a thing. The Ancient Kingdom was a place in this story. Like he's thought too much about how this world works for it to just like be. Can I spoil a different manga here? Is that am I allowed? Will Allie yell at me when she eventually
depends on the
listens
manga
to this? Dr. Stone's ending. I won't
don't spoil it. I don't want to know.
I won't spoil it. But Dr. Stone's ending is one of those ones where you can guess about halfway through, and you don't want it to be like that. You're like, I kind of hope it's not this. And then it kind of turns out to be that. And I won't say that it ruins the series. I don't think it's a bad ending. It's just not the ending that I hoped it would be, because it tries to do some of that a little bit. It tries to get a little bit metatextual with it, and instead of like really intrinsically thoughtful about itself. And I don't get that vibe from One Piece at all. I don't think that's where we're going. I think we have a better idea of where One Piece ends today than we did a week ago. But I think it's in a place where we were all kind of feeling like it was going already. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The last comment from Black Knight Halberd, 42, frequent commenter. Love that we've been getting so many check-ins with not just pre-time skip, but pre-Grand Line characters, hammering home that we're entering the climax of this gargantuan story, gargantuan in all caps. Have we seen Zeph and the Baratier crew yet? They're the only major island the Straw Hats visited I don't think we've seen yet. Most are probably more excited to see people like Kureha or Vivi, but it was a genuine delight to see Foxy, the snidely whiplash of One Piece. Again, Hayao Miyazaki style post-apocalypse, let's go. I live for this sort of reveal. That underwater panel feels ripped right out of Castle in the Sky, where the protagonists look down into the pool and see the whole submerged city beneath it. Any story that gives me those vibes gets big points. Part of the reason I even was convinced to start One Piece was because it had floating islands like that movie, LMAO. I'd be thrilled if Oda took influence from that other god of storytelling. Should have realized it before with the ancient weapons and such. Cannot wait for more Void Century stuff now. Ivankov striking the crane pose out of shock cracks me up. I hope Mocktown sinks first. Yeah, a couple thoughts on this. One, no, I don't think we have seen Zeph and the Baratier yet. And I think that I don't think we've seen every island. Like we haven't seen like Thriller Bark, but I guess that's because it's not really. I don't think we can. But yeah, just about like we've been almost everywhere. We haven't seen the Skypeans. Like we've seen Jaya, sure, but we haven't seen like, Wiper and that gang. But I doubt they have a Den Den Mushi, so it wouldn't make sense. And
anyway. I wouldn't have thought Wano had a Den Den Mushi, but here we are. Like we figured out a way to do it. So, which it's not like they made it up. Like Orochi having one makes sense, but I mean, nothing's impossible. Like again, if we somehow get Enel showing up next chapter, I mean, I'm not gonna question it. I'm just be like, cool, sounds good.
Yeah, and as far as Hayao Miyazaki, yes, I mean that is a long established, major. I don't want to say influence on Oda,
Oh,
but yeah.
Castle in the Sky has absolutely been an influence, like specifically Castle in the Sky.
I just, yeah, Castle in the Sky, but I just want to be careful with that because I know there has been a little bit of like an oversimplification in terms of like people comparing Oda with several of things. Specifically, My Neighbor Totoro and Kiki's Delivery Service has caused a little bit of contention where people are like, okay, like particularly like look at something like Porco Rosso in terms of like the tone and the humor of One Piece and like trying to, I think that some people get a little defensive about that, saying like, no, like Oda borrows a little bit, but like it's a little bit too much to say that he's like fully informed by Miyazaki, but at the same time, like I don't want to get in trouble. That's the only thing.
I think it's at this point when it comes to influences with Oda, you're hard pressed to find things that he's not into. You know, I saw a lot of people.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of YouTubers are like, "Oh, Oda went and saw Dune," and it's like, no, there's no way he didn't already read those books. That man has read all the Dune novels. There's no way he hasn't, because
he's a nerd. He's the biggest nerd. He's our friend, boss nerd.
He loves the art form of creation. Like he loves all of these things. So there's a bunch of different influences everywhere.
Dude's been influenced by Pixar.
Yeah. It's and he continues to be influenced. We mentioned before the Bonnie story. Bonnie kind of becoming this big character and potentially a Straw Hat because we haven't pushed John's narrative lately, and we should do that. But, you know, if that does come to fruition, that's because he's a parent now, and that influences his writing differently. It's okay to be influenced by those things. When, you know, I hope people don't hear like, oh, this was inspired by this, and come away with some sort of like
it's a rip-off.
Some sort of like it's a rip-off or anything like that.
Exactly.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is an artist being inspired by something and taking that and run with it. And it makes that more enriching. That's what you could tell. That's how you can tell the difference between like a hack and somebody genuinely inspired. And just look at manga itself. Every single manga right now, go open, regardless of the genre, go open it up in Shonen Jump right now in the app that you subscribed to at the top when we recommended it. You're going to find a manga that either directly references One Piece or is inspired by it or inspired to not be like it. That is also a valid response. That doesn't mean that they're all derivative of One Piece any more than One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, all of those were derivative of Dragon Ball. That's the beautiful thing about like this artistic expression. So, you know, the fact that panel does look like it's ripped out of Castle in the Sky is very, very cool. And we don't get a lot of those often because I imagine they're a pain to draw. And that's great in and of itself. But it's very much a One Piece panel still, and that's what makes it great.
It also reminded me of like some of those panels in like Calvin and Hobbes, where like all of a sudden Bill Watterson would just be like, I'm going to have the time of my life drawing this. Yes. And he would just draw these like super elaborate things for Calvin's like dream, scapes and everything. But yeah, anyway. Okay. So that's all the comments. And I know we're a bit over time, but Travis, should I share my new One Piece theory and then tease the Discord? Because look, if you're in the Discord, then you can tell me off like directly and be like, John, you're a fool. Here's why.
John, you promised them a new One Piece theory, so you have to deliver. We told them it was at the end, so they skipped all the way here, so we got to give it to them.
That's right. Okay, so my new One Piece theory, and it ties into Luffy's dream and the One Piece itself. I think Luffy wants to make all the food in the world free. Or even further than that, he wants to make it so that no one ever has to pay to buy anything that they need. Food, shelter, water, any of that stuff. He would have to be king of the pirates to make this happen because that's how every arc seems to go. If he's the king of the pirates, the king of the hill or whatever, then no one can take advantage of other people weaker than them. So basically, he is looking at capitalism and saying, no, thank you. You cannot charge people because, you can't exploit these people because you are stronger than them because I'm the strongest guy around. And that's, I'm going to say that this is how it's going to be. And I think that the One Piece itself is a play on the concept. And this is where I get a little bit of like tinkering. I think it's a concept in the Pieces of Eight. Pieces of Eight is a very specific thing in pirate lore. Basically, Pieces of Eight is you'd have a coin and people would split them into different pieces because they didn't have change back then. That's kind of the concept. And the idea is that the world currency would no longer have to be split among the different people in the world in order to have value. So what I mean is that like the one piece would essentially pay for all of like the food and the abundance in the world. It's kind of like the Christian thing, you know, like Jesus paying for everybody's sins. That's kind of like Oda playing on that. I think that this is supported by how some people like the Buccaneers, they view like that there's like a literal Bible, you know, for the sun god Nika, like a messianic figure, you know, who's going to bring about joy for everyone. And what brings about joy better than a feast, a party, like having free food, you know? And I don't even have to get into like how that is clear. Like we already talked about it in this conversation about how that's like Luffy's driving motivation in every arc. It's like, this person gave me food, I will die for them. Like that is like the thing. And to put it another way, I think Luffy is going to use the One Piece in some kind of specific, tangible sense to buy all the food in the world and then give it to everyone for free, forever. And the idea of making food free, I think it's completely in line with, it's a childish dream, but at the same time, it's so idealistic that you can believe that Roger would have that same kind of ideal. We don't know much about Roger yet. I can't point to specific things about Roger that are like that, of like, you know, starvation and world hunger and stuff being a motivation for him. But I think there's plenty of room for it. And I especially think like if you want to go all the way back to the beginning of the series and the hints and the drops and everything, it really does always come down to like every one of these characters need food and money, basically. Like Nami's whole arc, you know, growing up super poor, Sanji, obviously, Kaya being exploited for her money and status by Captain Kuro. Like it's always the running theme in the earliest stuff. And I think that is where you kind of have to pay attention to where like Oda was like leading all of this toward. More so even than, you know, when we're in the Grand Line. It's always been a sticking point. And like I said before, when Luffy says his dream, everybody has a specific reaction, right? And some people like hearing that would be like kind of shocked. They'd be confused of like, why, what? Like they wouldn't know what to say. But specifically though, there were characters who were a little bit like Sanji, who were kind of like, yes, like that is exactly like, yeah, you know, because like Sanji immediately would connect to that kind of idea. I put this in the Discord. Travis put a picture of Karl Marx with the beam eyes, was awesome. And I stand by this. I think I'm not saying it has juice, but I feel like I prepared a nice dish. It might satiate.
I think if you let this simmer a little bit more, you're really onto something, because you know there's a political element to this, and people are going to be like, "Oh, you're being like Hassan Piker. You're reading politics into this. You're bringing your own ideology into it." But you're not, right? It is a very simple concept that fits Luffy's characterization, where people who have the ability to do something do that for the sake of another person. And that's what strength is. That's what he learns very early on in the beginning of the series, is like that's just the right thing to do. Not because you're a hero, because heroes share their food. It's just you have the ability to do something, do it, move on. Luffy himself is not necessarily like a political character in that he has like political motivations himself or anything, but rather natural instincts, right? It's people's basic needs being met because that just makes sense to him. So I like this idea because it does really jive with his personality. And honestly, it does kind of sound like something Roger could be into as a pirate himself, as somebody who seeks that same kind of freedom and liberation. If you don't have those, like think about yourself. If you're listening to John's theory, you're like, that's commie bullcrap. Think about yourself for a minute and ask yourself, what would you do if you didn't have to go to work to pay for food? What would you do with your time?
I'd go to work to pay for rent.
But yeah, we'd have to deal with rent and stuff too.
Well, I have a mortgage, but yeah, yes.
You know what I mean? Like if you didn't have to worry about shelter and food, and you just had the freedom to seek whatever pleasures you
follow your dreams
on that point. If you could live your dreams, yeah, you'd create, you'd live. It's the pirate life.
You could be a producer for Ricky Pirate Radio.
You could. We could always use another one. Ours kind of wants to quit, but also has to pay their rent because we're going too long. But like really, like think about the pirate life that Luffy leads, not necessarily the pirate life that like doesn't want to pay for Crunchyroll, but like like that's what he represents, right? Is removing the barriers. It's why the Doflamingo fight's one of my favorite things, because he doesn't yell at Doflamingo for all of his various crimes. He's just like, you put this cage around me and you're suffocating me. That's such a good Luffy line because it's so emblematic of who he is as a person. He just doesn't want to be restrained or held back. And I think we all kind of sympathize with that. So I like this idea, even if it's not like literally, I want to make all the food in the world free, you know, in those words necessarily. I like this idea because it's playing with who Luffy is as a person in a way that a lot of these theories, I think, try to avoid because they're trying to get too like narrow focused. They got to dream way more esoteric. So I think you're really cooking with this one. The first time for everything, Zoro.
Nice. Thanks, Travis. I'm glad you entertained this as much as you did. Now, of course, if you're listening and you're just like, well, John, I see a few holes. Or if you're like, well, John, yeah, maybe you forgot this or that. The Discord is your destination. And we thank you, of course, for listening to this overlong episode of Ricky Pirate Radio. We do not have a break next week, I don't think. And in fact, I have the Raws that I'm going to be reading hopefully pretty soon for chapter 1116. And so I will, of course, be leaving cryptic responses and spoiler-free tags for that in the Discord as well once I get to it. And Travis, thank you as always. And, here's to the next one, I guess. We missed last week. We didn't have time to record anything. I am not caught up on Go Loser Ranger yet, but we are working on that because we do want to talk about that one of our next round
so
tables
good.
if we can. Looking forward to it. But all right, we all bye.